You're tuned in to the Dish TV, the talk show from SRI International that highlights our people, products, and technology portfolio. This series will focus on startups incubated by SRI Ventures. We invest in big ideas that create world-changing enterprises to make people safer, healthier, and more productive. I'm Renita Malhotra Hora, Head of Marketing and Communications. In this episode, my guest is Raj Singh, CEO and co-founder of Loop Team, the virtual office solution. I asked Raj where the idea for Loop Team came from and how SRI's technology was incorporated to create features that enable faster communication and collaboration for distributed teams.
My last company was Tempo AI, which was also an SRI spinoff from the Ventures Group. And we were building a smart calendar, and some folks within SRI might be already familiar, which was acquired by Salesforce. And so I was there for some time. The genesis behind Loop Team and how this started really comes from Tempo. Two things. One, we had a semi-distributed team. We had a small base here in Menlo Park, and then we had remote individuals all over the US at the time: Seattle, San Diego, LA, San Luis Obispo, Denver, and so forth. You know, we had to do some things to make the team feel more connected. And there wasn't a lot of published literature around this at that time. And people talk about remote, but there's just co-located offices, and they're not actually like working from home remote. What we did to sort of deal with that was we set up these 24-hour video water coolers. So we had a video water cooler that was always running in our office. And then we would set up, with each new employee that joined the team, we would ship them a second device. So it could be an iPad or another computer. And they would just join into the water cooler, and they were always on. And it felt a little weird at first because, like, wait, I've got this other video on me all the time. But it wasn't like this front face shot. It was kind of a side angle. But the benefit grossly outweighed the sense of if there was a kind of a privacy invasion. And the team members who would do this over time, they just loved it. I would check in with my team after I left Salesforce, those that were remote, and I'd just say how things are going. And they would say, I'm hating that I'm having to fly back to Salesforce for 1 week every month, just because they just completely forget me. Even though the company is remote friendly, it isn't really a remote first kind of mindset. With Loop Team, what we were really trying to do, the thinking is, how can we recreate some of those benefits of office IRL in real life in a virtual kind of setting?
Can you describe to me what the product really is? How is it different from things that I might already know about Zoom, for example, as
Sure.
we're on right now?
Yeah. When you think about Zoom, formalized meetings, you have something scheduled on the calendar, you have a discussion. It doesn't necessarily cater to that kind of hallway chatter, or you're sitting at your desk in the office and somebody behind you starts talking about Warriors in the playoffs, and you're like, hey, you know what, I have a comment to chime in on, and I'm going to jump in, even though I don't work with this team, I don't even know this individual, but it's an opportunity for me to connect. And so we like to say that we're all the communication that's between, where the real work happens between your meetings, when the different ICs are collaborating and discussing. So if you take, for example, a small group of engineers or a small group of designers or accountants, it doesn't matter what the occupation is, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on. They might be working on something, and typically in an office, they would look at their colleague and say, okay, colleague looks like they're fidgeting through a bunch of apps, doesn't look like they're super in flow, headsets are off. Let me go talk to Jill. Let me go shoulder tap her and ask my quick question, because I need to go figure out, this answer to this little problem. Today, if you're all working from home, super hard to do that. You don't know if Jill's even online. You don't know if Jill's in flow or busy right now, or maybe with her kids. And you sort of have to resort to going to Slack or whatever messaging tool that you're kind of using and say, hey, I've got a question and I need to discuss. And it may result in a calendar invite, or it may result in an hour lost because it's asynchronous. And so we really try to recreate that collaborative feel, live sort of discussion feel that ICs experience when they're physically in an office, but in a virtual kind of way. Like what we like to say, the shoulder tap.
You mentioned something very important. You mentioned um, Loop Team really gives you the ability to capture what goes on in between those scheduled meetings. How important is that?
In my opinion, the work that actually happens during the shoulder taps and the quick collaboration is actually more important than the formal meetings. In the formal meetings, you often have a host whose sort of job is to kind of drive to a decision and drive sort of consensus. But the real work that the ICs are doing in between, that's like when this production actually happens, and that's when they're needing to have a lot of fast and quick collaboration.
So, Raj, tell me how SRI technology plays into this. You mentioned communications, sort of underscoring everything. What part of SRI did you work with? Which divisions, and how does it feed into your product?
There's a lot of data that shows that distributed teams create 10 times more documentation than on-site teams, which makes perfect sense because the more distributed you are, the more asynchronous you have to be. You have to capture more sort of content. And so one of the aspects of Loop Team, in addition to making it really easy to sort of see people, what they're doing, who's around, who's available, and quickly shoulder tap, is to share conversations. So if there's a discussion, you can actually publish it into a feed and disseminate it across your team, and this is especially useful when you start thinking about things like uh, small group design reviews, small group daily stand-ups, peer coding discussions, on little short onboarding discussions with different team members, bug jam sessions, whatnot. And a lot of those things get lost. And so by publishing it out and disseminating it, we're allowing for remote team members in a fully distributed sort of environment to have more access while also creating more transparency, which, by the way, I think is one of the greatest outcomes of this whole thing. Is distributed teams create open and transparent cultures because it's necessary, and I think that's one of the things that's going to happen just to sort of make work done. So where SRI sort of comes into play is as part of these uh, uh, meetings, conversations that are being captured and shared, we do some summarization. And we built that in conjunction with SRI. And we worked with the AIC and the natural language teams down in San Diego, where we actually try to take a little conversation snippet. And, again, the goal here is not to necessarily say, hey, here's the full meeting that you missed. The goal here is really to just give you a glimpse of like what are the discussions going on, what are the other discussions that I may have missed. It just makes you feel like you're there. It makes you feel like you have access. And so we summarize the discussion into simply just some keywords, a couple sentences, and so you kind of get a sense that, hey, while I was asleep, I woke up in the morning. They had discussions about X, Y, and Z, and this one might be relevant to me. Maybe I should go and ping John on that team and see if he needed me for something.
Our AI lab and our conversational AI platforms, I can see how those would be integral to the development of this. Now, you launched Loop Team not too long ago, and then all of a sudden there was COVID-19.
Yes. What's interesting is when we initially sort of opened up Loop Team to start bringing on board more and more alphas, a lot of the early adopters were partially distributed and fully distributed, but mostly early adopter tech community, as you would expect. Um, Post COVID, everyone obviously fully distributed. We have all kinds of teams. We have universities like the University of Washington. We have we have government. We have the mayoral office in San Jose. We have healthcare companies. We have Fortune 500 tech companies. We have a law firm. We have some financial services companies. I mean, all sorts of different companies that are using Loop Team every day to keep their small group within their organization super connected and to allow that sort of fast communication collaboration.
All these examples that you mentioned, are they all using it for this kind of hallway chatter or in between meetings kind of
Yes,
connectedness?
primarily, yes, yeah, and small group recurring meetings. I think the most fascinating part of all of this is because of COVID. Um, just as Zoom has said, they've been seeing hundreds of new use cases emerge. We're seeing it in our category as well. Our category being called sort of virtual office as well, where these small groups in different sort of facilities and setups are needing presence and needing ways to do that quick sort of shoulder tap without dealing with all the formality of a formal conferencing tool and calendar driven kind of experience. They just want to quickly jump in, almost push to talk, walkie talkie, have discussion, get work done, share it out if they need to share it out. So their asynchronous distributed team members get what they need, and then get back to work.
This active onboarding of new teams that you've had since COVID hit, Has that been the result of aggressive selling that went really well because of the situation, or did they just show up?
No, that's the crazy part about this. We haven't launched. This has
Yeah.
been completely word of mouth organic. So this is we get tons of signups every day. These are teams that are just coming to us. So I think this trend line is here to stay. I think a lot of the data and much of this data is pre-COVID era, but tends to show that engagement is higher, productivity is higher, workplace happiness is higher when you allow employees to work from home. And I think employers are realizing in this work from home experiment that they actually can be productive, and it is kind of working, and they're eliminating commutes and allowing people to live anywhere they want. I think this trend is just starting now. Now I think it's going to have a massive ripple effect across all industries. I want to see it go beyond tech, where you start seeing large banks and other industries like that say, hey, you can work from home. I think this phenomenon is going to be one of the greatest disruptors that people have been talking about. I mean, we were on top of this for 2 years in the process of building Loop Team, but people have been talking about it for years.